space up with some heart-centered tones. Welcome. It's been a while since I posted, and in that time I have been going through it. I have been really struggling. I've been struggling. So today I want to do I'm getting a Tales by Moonlight. We'll see what it ends up as. If it's Tales by Moonlight, if it's Musings of Them podcast, either one, it's still going to be on the channel. And I wanted to just open up and say, I am a little bit uncomfortable about what I'm going to be talking about, but this is a part of the practice that I'm doing for myself in order for me to be the most effective in sharing my message, in sharing my story, in teaching the wisdom and the knowledge that I've accumulated through my own personal experience and also through ancestrally through my role as a dibia. I gotta be vulnerable. I gotta be transparent. I gotta be honest. I gotta be open about my own experiences and how I am able to get through them, how I'm able to grow through them in the failures and the hardships and mistakes, right? And so that's been something that's been difficult for me, the depth of vulnerability that is required for me to sit here and to talk to y'all openly and honestly is one where I've had to really do some healing around being able to be seen for the fullness of myself. And when I say fullness, again, I'm not just talking about the parts of myself I like. I'm talking about my dark. I'm talking about my shadows. I'm talking about the taboo things people don't like to talk about, the addictions, the bad habits, the things that I still am working through, even though I have done so much healing and I have closed out so many cycles. I don't believe healing is a lifelong thing. I believe we can get to a point where we are fully healed. I don't believe we have to continue to stretch it out. Just like someone can get to a point where they are enlightened or they are one with their higher self, Chineke, Chi, God, or whatever you want to call it, we can get to a point where we're fully healed. And I'm almost at the point where I've done all the healing that I can do on my own. And the healing that I am being called to do is now in relationship to, relationship with, even though I am in relationship with myself. And so these past 3 weeks, or is it two weeks, I found myself falling back into an old cycle. And the thing about cycles, I'll do another thing about karmic cycles and breaking karmic cycles, is that in order to break it, you have to kind of go through the cycle again and again to find the point, to understand yourself. And so I found myself falling about to an old cycle of addiction. And the thing about addiction is it's not really one particular thing. It's more of a wider spectrum of addictive tendencies. If you've been following my personal story, you know that I have not had an easy life. I have had a lot of things stacked to get me. I've gone through a lot of shit. to put it bluntly, I've gone through a lot of abuse, a lot of violence, a lot of betrayal, a lot of heartbreak. And in the process of all of that, especially the childhood trauma and the intergenerational trauma I inherited, I learned some coping mechanisms that weren't helpful for me. I learned to escape. I learned to numb my pain through bringing my attention to things outside of me to make me feel good, so I didn't have to face the pain inside. And so these cycles have continued for a really long time in my life. My first experience with addiction was candy. When I was a kid, we used to go to trick or treating, yes. And This is when we used to go to everyone's little house, and when we were able and allowed to go, because sometimes we didn't have like we weren't allowed to go, or we didn't have like a costume because we couldn't afford it, or my parents couldn't be bothered. I don't know. And so when we were allowed to go, we'd gather all this candy, and that's when I was like, yes, this is the time. And I remember just being there like on the bed, all this candy spread out, and I would just eat. I would eat and eat and eat until I get myself sick. And I got to a point where my mom would do this thing where she would make us take 3 candies out, and then she would take the rest, and then she would like hide it. And me being me, I was like, that's not gonna stop me. And I would just like go to where she hid it and like figure out where she hid it and trying to untie the tie of the bag that held the candy, and remember the exact way that she tied it so I could retie it and then grab the candy that I wanted. And I would hide the wrappers in my pillowcase, and that was like the hiding spot, you know, eating candy in bed and hiding in the pillowcase. Not good at all for my teeth, mind you. I had so many cavities. But that was like my first thing I would stick to. The second thing was reading. Like, I loved fantasy and I loved sci-fi. So the point I'm trying to make here is that it started young, right? This need to escape my reality because it was so painful, because I didn't understand why all these things were happening to me, why people were treating me that way, why I was experiencing what I was experiencing, and I needed a reprieve. And so as a child, I sought these different ways of reprieve. And before I knew what I knew now, those different ways morphed into other things. And eventually I was playing whack-a-mole with my addiction tendencies, where I was like, okay, I got the candy down, got that down. And then it turned into like just a wider food. And then I ended up having binge eating disorder. And then I was like, okay, I got the binge eating disorder down. And then it turned into restricting food. And then I got that down. I'm no longer restricting food. And then it turned into being addicted to seeking validation from others. And then phone. And then it's like, it literally kept moving. It's like I would figure out how to deal with one addiction, and then the goal would be moved, and then another one would pop up. And that's because I wasn't really addressing the underlying issue. The underlying root cause of the addiction was what happened inside of me when I experienced those traumatic experiences. It was the lack of being able to process and release the pain that I held inside, because I had to disassociate, because I had to remove myself. And thus, because I wanted to escape, essentially, from the reality that I was living. And that occurred in so many ways. And in our society, there's so many labels of like different ways of that showed up in my life. Like a maladaptive, what did they call it? Maladaptive daydreaming. Maladaptive daydreaming is one of the ways that it showed up, and one of the like labels that our society tends to put on things without really understanding the root cause. And so the root cause for me was my trauma inside and the experiences of that I held within. And so 3 weeks ago, I was traveling and I was feeling good, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to engage with the medicine of marijuana in a very healthy way. I'm going to do it in ceremony, because now I try not to use plant medicines unless I'm doing it in a intentional, ritual, ceremonial way, because that is what it's called of me now as a dibia. And I was like, okay, I've been getting dreams about taking this plant. There's something here for me. And there definitely was. The first, I did a couple of ceremonies, and I was like, okay, I'm getting all this knowledge. I'm gathering all of this information. It was a lot. I was getting download after download after download. And I was like, okay, great. And there came a point where there was a decision point where I said, okay, I'm going to use this recreationally or not. And I made the decision to use it recreationally. And I knew, and I thought I knew then that I could handle it. But then I saw myself spiral. And then one recreational use led to another. And eventually I was high all day, which was one of the cycles that I had recently broken out of, and closing the complete cycle of addiction. And so I found myself back into that cycle. And the thing about me being on high all day is you get the munchies, you're always eating, and then you're not making the best choices for your body. And it's when you are taking plant medicines, you open yourself up to the spiritual realm and to the energy realm. And when I say plant medicine, I'm not just talking about marijuana. I'm talking about like alcohol too. And so you have to be really careful when you're imbibing these things and you're doing it to a great extent, because you are more susceptible and vulnerable to interacting with the unseen realm. And entities that are not for your highest good are going to be like more susceptible to interacting with you as well. And so I was in this process where I was going through this spiral and I saw myself. And it's interesting because part of my spiritual ascension journey has been being able to meet myself with the same compassion, the same love, the same kindness, the same mercy that I meet others. Like, it's really easy for me to do that for others, but when it came to myself, that's where I was a bit lacking. And I saw myself going through the cycle. And I said, you know what? It's okay. I'm not going to beat myself up for this. This is a part of the cycle, and it's something I've learned in the past regarding my addictions, that there's a flare up where it'd be like a really strong urge, and then I'll go get sucked back in, and then I'm like, okay, let me get out of it. And the length of time between it like gets longer and longer as I heal the energy of it. So now I'm at a point where the energy of it is now ready to be closed out completely. And I'm in a place where I'm seeing myself in the cycle, and I'm like, okay, I have a decision to make. I need to either continue or I allow myself to break out. But if I had continued to beat myself up, I wouldn't have given myself the permission to say, okay, I'm done with this lifestyle. I'm done. I'm done. And to close it out. And in the process of doing that, because again, I've been working on energetically transmuting the energy of addiction to positive obsession, right? Because everything comes in twos. So just like you have an energy that is considered negative, you can have an energy that is considered positive. It's just the flip side of it. And like getting sober and then going through the recovery process, the detox process, and then also like not working out or not moving my body, and then having to like kind of be in my body again after like all the weight I put on because of the like binge eating and just eating like crap and shit. And then holding myself in compassion and being like, it's okay. This is just 2 weeks out of your entire life, and it's okay to make mistakes, that it's okay to be flawed. And I was just like really trying to speak this life into myself. Not to say I always succeeded, because there were definitely times when in the process of engaging with marijuana, because I was susceptible to unseen realm, I was receiving the spiritual attacks that are being sent to me were coming through. Let's say that, because people be trying to attack me left and right, and most of the time I ain't doing shit. But when I leave myself susceptible, then it's gonna start doing shit. And the shit that it was starting to do was like intrusive thoughts. This feeling of like, oh, I want to do this or I want to do that, and I know it's not good for me. And then the voices get louder, and then the feelings get stronger. And this is how spiritual attacks come through for me. And I found myself in such a low state where I was like sobbing and crying. I was like, no, this isn't it. I can't continue to do this. Like, I am not okay in this state. And that is okay. But what do I need to do to move out of this? And so I'm coming out of that place. Like, I'm fully out of it, right? I'm sober. I'm detoxed. I'm energetically in energetic sovereignty. And I just wanted to talk to y'all about it, because in this healing journey, in the spiritual journey that you're on, especially when it comes to healing from trauma, healing from traumatic experiences, healing from things and from the past, we have to be gentle with ourselves. We have to show and shower ourselves with care, with love, and give ourselves the opportunity to get back up again and move forward without the judgment, without the criticism, without the negativity, knowing that we are going to get back into the cycle. We might be pulled back in, and we can allow ourselves to be pulled out. And so, even in talking with y'all about this so openly and honestly, I realized, like, this is what I need to do. Like, there aren't many spiritual practitioners, spiritualists, spiritual teachers, whatever you want to call it, spiritual leaders, who really talk about, like, the shit they go through, because, and really, like, own their humanness. It's this interesting thing, especially in the Western world, where if you're spiritual, if you've reached a certain level of spiritual understanding, or what people call enlightenment, all of a sudden you're like a demigod, or all of a sudden you are put on this pedestal and you are made to be perfect. And the thing is, like, nobody's perfect. Each and every one of us has an ego. Whether or not your ego is in alignment with your soul is the question, right? Whether or not your ego is under the command of your higher self, of God the Creator, of Chineke, is the question. And I'm not here to show myself as a perfect human being, because I am definitely not that. But I, at the end of the day, am all about being my authentic self and guiding folks to be their authentic self and be in alignment with their soul. And in order to do that, I have to be that, right? And so I just wanted to share with y'all that update about myself, and just like where I am and where I've arrived. And to know that it does take a lot of strength to be vulnerable. It takes a lot of strength to allow yourself to be seen for the not so pretty, not so gathered, not so calculated parts of yourself. It takes a lot of strength to say, you know what, I'm going to put myself out there, I'm going to be myself, and I'm going to let the chips lie as they must, with the knowing that those who resonate and those who are aligned to the truth, to your truth, are going to see you for who you are and want to be in your life. It takes a lot of strength to be vulnerable. It does. And if you don't think so, I want you to do what I just did. Get on the interwebs and start sharing your deepest, darkest, and see how it feels. I have a feeling wheel here, if you've never heard of those things, and I often use it to help bring words to how I'm feeling. And sometimes it's not enough. It's not enough because the words are not deep enough. And so there's like surprised, bad, fearful, angry, happy, sad, disappointed. And then they break it down into more specific emotions. I am feeling courageous for doing this. Like, this is a huge step for me, y'all. Getting on YouTube, getting on social media was a huge step for me. And it's not in my nature to be out here in these interstreets. And so I'm literally fighting all of my conditioning that I've had to keep small, to be small, to not show myself, to hide myself away, to do this. And so I'm feeling courageous because on top of that, I've been in hermitude for the past 3 years. Just working on me, like really just doing the inner work, really just healing, developing myself spiritually, getting to know myself, being in relationship with myself. And now I'm being called to share more deeply and fully and openly about my own journey and what I've learned. it's taken a lot of me to really like let go and release the limiting beliefs of the subconscious fears, of the need for external validation, with the knowing that this is part of my path. This is something I'm meant to do, and I'm going to be successful. My little 7 subscribers, you're listening to this, but the other millions of y'all who will be listening to this isn't a fluke. It isn't a fluke. And so it takes strength to be vulnerable. And I say that because I want you to ask yourself, where in your life are you being called to show up more authentically? Where in your life are you being called to let yourself be seen? To let yourself be seen, to let your humanity be seen. Without judgment or critique or, oh, is this enough or not enough? Because that's something that went on in my head. Like, am I enough or not? It's like, that doesn't even matter. Because what's meant for me will not pass me by as long as I'm aligned. Those thoughts of being enough or not enough are defined by society and societal norms and conventions and what we've been taught and programmed and how it's been treated. But because each of one of us is divine, we are always enough, all the time. Where are you being called to allow yourself to be seen for the truth that you hold within, for the truth that is meant to be expressed, knowing that maybe not tomorrow you're going to like go out and do that thing that you want to do, but you can start taking steps in that direction. Steps in that direction. I really don't have any, frankly don't care what anyone thinks about my addictive tendencies. I think for me, it was more of the act of being and sharing intimate parts of myself with everyone, knowing that like, when you're talking about trauma, one of the symptoms of it is addiction tendencies, is escapist tendencies. That's just piece, part, and parcel. Not to say everyone who goes to trauma is going to develop that. And it is very often that we live in a society where many of us are traumatized. And I'm going to get into defining trauma in another video. I'm going to just leave it at that. Living in such an unjust, oppressive society is traumatizing. Whether or not it shows up in big ways or little ways, because there's a lot of things one can be addicted to, right? There's a lot of things one can be used to escape. So I just want to leave it there and let y'all know I'm an addict. And I have escapist tendencies. And I've transmuted both of those into positive obsession. Closing out those cycles, knowing that they might flare up again, but they're closed. And that I'm taking this opportunity to show y'all like how it looks, what it looks, to use vulnerability as strength. Because I feel like in this, even though I was like, I don't know if I really want to do this, in the doing of it, I feel more empowered in myself. In the sharing of my truth, I feel more empowered in myself, knowing that it's going to resonate however it resonates. So with that, I guess this turned out to be more of like a mockcast, Tales by Moonlight fusion. I'm going to leave that there because there's something else I want to share in another video, which I'll catch you there. And with that, thank you, Motley Crew, for taking your time out wherever, whenever you are, for listening, for being, for witnessing, holding space for yourself, for me. I want you to ask yourself, what do you need right now? What do you feel? If you need a feeling wheel or emotion wheel, Google it. If you're having trouble, if you're someone who has trouble attaching sensations to words, and then give yourself that. Maybe not now or right after the video, but just note it for yourself. And so with love, take care.